It's amazing how much the world can change when you're offline for a few weeks. Between the assassination attempt on Trump and Biden stepping down to the insane and heretical opening ceremony at the Olympics, there's a lot to catch up on and to talk about, which I'll be doing quite soon. But before I dive into all of the insane things that we've seen happening on the internet, I figured since I just experienced the shock of reintegrating into the internet world after being free from it, it would be a good time to talk about the negative effects that the internet has had on our culture and world, and how we can regain some correct perspective about it rather than letting it control us. I'm Matthew Murphy, and this is Herald from the North. Imagine, if you will, a small town in Montana back before major technological advances like the internet or smartphones. People would get up early to plow their fields or open their mills, working tirelessly till the sun goes down. They would converse with their neighbors about the weather or the crop from that year, and then go home and enjoy supper with their families and wake up the next day and do it all again. With very little news coming in or out of the town, the controversies were usually limited to the general area and handled in such a way that forced the townspeople to learn how to work with one another and understand that there will always be a tension when living with broken people in a broken world. But on the positive side, there was the chance for a true sense of community and the opportunity to learn what it means to actually support and encourage the people around them. And while it may not have been perfect, it was perhaps a more simple and fulfilling life. Now consider the technology of today. With complete and total access to any idea on the internet, people aren't bound by ideas like morality and reason that come with their small town. They now have a sphere that allows them to act, feel, and think however they want without consequence. They're disconnected from all sense of accountability for their actions, and they're loose from all sense of responsibility towards those around them. This leads to a major problem that tends to get overlooked by many who discuss the ins and outs of a digital existence and the larger implications for the world as a whole, and that is the validation of vice. As is so often the case, one problem is the cause of another. In the case of the validation of vice, it stems from having access to a vast array of content that we never would have had available to us before. Sinful humans will always find a way to engage in destructive activities, but the ability to access immoral and depraved material online takes the temptation to a whole nother level. There's never been a time in history where a person could, at any moment on a whim, find and experience things that most humans throughout history could and often had gone their entire lives without encountering. Finding the strength to resist evil is already hard, but considering how easy it is to access online, it's a wonder that our society still runs at all. And this problem doesn't just affect people who seek it out. The shameful content is so prolific that it's basically impossible to avoid odious images and videos if you spend more than 30 seconds online. Anything from meaningless soul-sucking TV shows to illicit websites, gore, and violence, the sheer amount of exposure is astronomically wider and more excessive than that of the past, where much of it would often be minimal, if not avoidable altogether. This is the precursor of the validation of vice, which then gets taken a step further when people have the desire for these behaviors to be affirmed. Back in rural Montana, people had the benefit of neighbors to help them discern right from wrong. If you acted like a narcissistic tomfool, you were forced to reckon with the people's reaction face to face. If you engaged in moral debauchery, you had to risk social isolation and mockery. These are the right reactions, and they help to show each other the error of our ways and to help guide one another to a healthier path. But not so anymore. If someone is seeking validation to help justify their vice, all they have to do is hop online and they'll find a, quote, community who will reassure them that they are morally in the green. Instead of learning from criticism and acknowledging their own shortcomings, people dismiss these ideas as oppressive and bigoted and run back to their, quote, community to bury their heads deeper in the sand. Combine that with the inflated and untrue rhetoric on the internet, and it makes for a perfect storm where people are simultaneously enraged and offended by everything in the world, yet spend the majority of their time inside on a screen. And if people who are opposed to this type of content react in a totally normal and proper way to the insane things being shared on the internet, they're yelled down for being intolerant and unloving by people on both the left and the right. To top it all off, even if someone is not seeking out the lewd content or wanting to debate cultic movements online, they're still not immune to their vices being validated. The habit of doom scrolling and watching meaningless videos online has become so ingrained in people that they are willingly wasting hours of their day that could be used for things that are far better. While being slothful may not often be perceived as an issue, it can be just as destructive to a person as wrath and lust. Just last month, Unilad put out an article that spoke about what happens when a remote tribe in the Amazon is introduced to the internet. It says, quote, "When the internet arrived, everyone was happy, but now things have gotten worse, and young people have gotten very lazy," end quote. It also speaks about how people in the tribe are falling for scams and watching illicit videos and consuming addictive social media and violent video games. The internet is so addicting that the tribe is even having trouble getting people to farm and fish, which is how they stay alive. What happened to this tribe shows just how damaging the internet can be for people. They were not equipped with the regulatory mindset that's necessary to keep the internet obsession under control, and it took over their world. And in America, even though people are generally aware that there are some potential risks of overusing the internet, they tend to ignore those warnings and to dive in headfirst, allowing social media and television to rule their lives. Everything I've said is all well and good, but the reality is the internet isn't going anywhere. So we have to ask the question, how can we escape from this vicious cycle? While no one answer will entirely solve this problem, here are just a few things that I've observed that will begin to help. First and foremostly, we have to be willing to acknowledge that the fault ultimately lies with the people, not the technology. While the internet can, in a manner of speaking, take over somebody's world, it can't do that unless a person using it makes it do so. I'm willing to call it addictive because the overuse of it can change people's brain chemistry, particularly in young people, which can make it a lot more difficult to break its usage as a habit. But even with that in mind, the internet can't force people to use it. Just like money and firearms, the internet is a tool. Regardless if it's used properly or misused, the onus still lies with the user. And I'm happy to acknowledge the culpability of social media that specifically designs its websites to be addictive, or the states that don't require illicit websites to use age verification. But changes to those problems mostly require things that are outside of the average person's sphere of control. The best place to start is to recognize our role in this problem so that we can target the solutions towards the things that people can realistically change. Once people accept that they're ultimately responsible for their actions, we can begin to point out the philosophical reasoning that leads to change, namely the truth that much of the internet should be seen as morally bankrupt and pointless, and that we should be seeking after the things that are worthwhile. We should point people towards the Bible and to logical reasoning and to thoughtful, earnest discussion to help them fill their time. Give people good books and good music to listen to. These are guides to help people discern truth and reality from farce. We should show them how much time they lose scrolling when it could be spent working towards their future goals and hopes. While the time we spend on the internet may not always feel like real life, all of the content posted on it involves real people. And just like the real world, there is such a thing as right and wrong, regardless of what medium people use to participate in either one. Finally, be intentional about planning time away from the internet to enjoy your life. Save TV and social media for the weekends, or turn off your phones and put them away out of sight. Don't give internet access to the kids unless absolutely necessary. Whatever works best to help bring the time spent online back under your control. And most importantly, go outside. Go on a hike. Enjoy the amazing world that we live in. And perhaps you too will be able to find some relief in the simplicity of a more genuine and less digital way of life. That's all I have for today. Thanks for listening. And until next time, farewell. Thanks for listening. Remember to use the links in the description to follow me on social media and wherever you get your podcasts so that you never miss an episode.